So this is my artistic director, Cayman. She took part in the Game Jam last year. For short, I call her Kay, in honor of my Aunt Kay, whose 100th birthday and 102nd birthday I've gone to in the last couple of years. So because I knew I wouldn't be here, or I'd be doing other things while I was here, and out for a little bit during the Game Jam, I wanted to work alone so I wouldn't hold anybody back. And I really wanted to try something related to my research. I wrote a journal paper, turned it in last month, haven't heard if it'll be published yet, but on a new game mechanic, and that's time travel. And so I used the weekend as a chance to play with that mechanic a bit. The idea was to let the player back up, undo things. And we've got undo commands in some of the platforms, but a little bit different. And so in this case, I did 2 rooms, one being a starting place, a clearing in honor of the beginning of Zork, and then a few artifacts there, a loaf of very stale bread, but still safe to eat, because I'm incorporating inspiration from the Grimm fairy tales, and so we'll use that crumbs for pathfinding later on. But also a flagon of grog, and a book of poetry, and a book of zoology, and a collapsible ladder. And so the idea is that the player, an obvious thing to do is to move east to the next room. And it has a fountain in, and there's a golden ball that the player is automatically playing when gameplay begins. And so when the player goes into the plaza, there's a fountain, and once the player has examined the fountain, the ball will fall out of her hand and into the fountain. And the fountain is too big, and it rolled to the center, so you can't just reach in and grab it. And so you've got to think of there are a couple of ways to solve the problem to retrieve the ball. And one of them is, because you have the ladder, and there's a comment that it's a lot bigger than it appears to. It really folds up nicely. You can open it up and put it across the fountain and then crawl out on the ladder and reach down and grab the ball. But the other one is a frog appears. And we know from the fairy tales how useful frogs can be, in particular in retrieving golden balls. So the player can ask the frog to retrieve the ball, and the frog says, well, no, I can't. I won't do it because I'm thirsty. And so at that point, the player character has to go back and get the flagon of grog and bring it and drop it, and then the frog drinks the grog, and then we'll go retrieve the ball. So pretty simple gameplay, but we only had 48 hours, right? And the idea is when you back up, that some things you can't undo, but a key thing is that you're always building up a score, and so you can win the game by completing the task, but get a very low score. And if your score drops below 0, then the game is over. Although I've given an option that I'll give you 10 points, and you can continue playing where you left off. So I'm trying to play with the idea of what it means to back up. And all I've done so far is that I back up acquiring an artifact by dropping it, and I undo going to a room by backing up one and losing points in the process. But the real thing is I want to be able to really, if I'm in the fountain, in the plaza with the fountain, and I have the zoology book with me, just dropping it doesn't seem right. I probably need to go back to the place where I found it, and then I may have to back up. I may just want to undo everything I've done since I first picked up the zoology book, which could be fairly disconcerting. Because what you would end up with when you back up to that point is you would lose all the artifacts you gained in that period. You'd still have knowledge in your head of how to play the game. I can't erase that from your mind very easily. But the other thing then would be there might be different levels where there's different mechanics for backing up. So there might be this simple one of dropping the item, going back to a room, and losing points in the process. Or it might be things like what it means to backtrack. Just what do you use? What do you lose? And I deliberately made this first level such that you can't undo everything. That in order even to have the quest to retrieve your ball from the fountain start, you have to have held on to the ball from the beginning and never have dropped it. So there's a lot of things going on like that I want to do some more with it. And again, I hate to try to demo it because itty-bitty font, nobody can see it, but I promise I'll do something later this semester.